Today's rant is about words, or in particular, a particular word. I hear a lot of talk on the internet of late about kings and queens, about men and women treating each other like royalty. The royal treatment is often lionized without respect for the fact that it also comes with its challenges. I find this especially difficult to understand why that's the case, because I remember growing up and seeing Aladdin, which features the Jasmine and Aladdin having a scene at the beginning where they both exchange how they wish they were somewhere other than where they were. Aladdin lionizes life in the palace, and Jasmine just can't wait to get out of it and find out what life is like somewhere else. So the royal treatment, or being treated like a king and queen, seems to appeal to very many. The great paradox of that is that pretty much everyone in America is already enjoying life that's better than the kings and queens of yesteryear. None of them would have ever imagined being able to communicate globally and instantly with anyone they wanted at any time, nor would they have imagined running water, central heat and air conditioning, electricity in general, cars, wardrobe choices, the entertainment that we enjoy, pensions and savings accounts ad infinitum. So here comes the problem I have in particular with this particular ideology. There are people who do not understand what this means. They do not understand the meaning of the royal treatment, nor do they understand how it might be used as bait and entrapment. My next door neighbors, who doesn't live there anymore, described his now third wife when they were dating as someone who, quote unquote, treated him like a king. He, of course, then went on to talk about the specific things that she did for him that made him feel like he was on top of the world. He was then very much surprised when, knowing a little bit about my marriage as he did, I said, yes, my wife treated me like a king too. And he paused, confused. Before I continued, she took away all of my power, locked me in the dungeon, and then took all of my money away. Because that is something that happens to kings too. The use of king and queen as an idea ignores some of the actual risks of being a king and queen. How many kings and queens were assassinated, usurped, or had their kingdoms threatened? In fact, it's actually more likely in history that a king's actual power would be threatened. One of the things I found most interesting about the CW's series they did on Mary at the beginning in the first season is how uncertain the French aristocracy was in France at the time Mary, Queen of Scots, came of age, where they basically were the king, but most of their vassals, the lords, the dukes, and the viscounts and such who pledged fealty to France, were actually not really that responsible, nor were most of the people. And so you see in this series how the king is always afraid of bandits and being kidnapped. In fact, Frances, Mary, Queen of Scots' first wife, is actually killed by bandits, which was historically true. There were a ton of bandits back then, and just because you were the king didn't mean everyone liked you. In fact, the King of France was held up primarily by virtue of military assistance from the Medici family in Italy, and because of the Mary, Queen of Scots' father, who was also a powerful French vassal who had a large mercenary army at his command that typically served the French crown rather than any other comers. That would probably be because the king had the most money. Being a king means always being wary of what's going on around you and the people that you know. Being a king means that you're a target. Being a king means you have a lot of things that people want. Being a king means that the poor people, when they're starving, they know you have food. Being a king appeals in some ways, but it also bears pause to take account of the risks associated with that. Many kings were deposed by their own families. Many kings were decapitated by their own siblings. Many kings were overthrown by other members of their family who conspired with others. If you don't believe me, go look up the Borgias. There seems to be this thing about Italians and controlling monarchs. That's probably a Roman thing. But even the Romans were tumultuous at best, and many of their leaders didn't last for very long, and they spent most of their time trying to defend their territory, capture more, and fight against their enemies. Being treated like a king isn't not necessarily a good thing. The royal treatment also comes with royal risks. This is not to say that the royal treatment is not desirable. Many of the royals, in fact, it's mostly the rich people in our world, enjoy access to and availability of the finest substances, or things that are considered to be so. Personally, I have no interest in eating caviar or escargot, or driving the cars that rich people drive, or going to the places that they go on vacation, primarily because I go on vacation to get away, and I eat food because of its nutritional value and not because of how it tastes. When your nasal cavity has been almost completely ablated by chemicals, as mine has, you lose a lot of your taste. And I like to joke with students that I have no taste, and that bears out in my wardrobe as well. For people who've criticized the way I look and the way I dress, that's a hat tip to you. So my rant is being treated like a king is not necessarily a good thing. A lot of times in relationships, during the honeymoon stage, as it's called, people will treat each other with the best of intentions and the best of actions, and then it usually peters off into routine and responsibility. At worst, like in my experience, they treat you the wrong way that a king wants to be treated, or a queen, and you become a prisoner in your own house. Remember that Esther was reticent to go to the king because anyone who went to the king was actually who was not summoned to the king was executed. This is also the royal treatment. And many kings have put off their wives, and so a woman should not desire to be treated like a queen because Mary Queen of Scots was beheaded. There is no, unless you only look very narrowly at a subject, there is no reason to be celebrating at carte blanche this type of moniker and identification. What he really celebrated, my neighbor, is how she was treating him like he was important. So the royal treatment isn't really being treated like a royal. It's being treated like you are, like you matter. And being treated like you matter can be done by anyone in any walk of life. And it doesn't always even come from humans. I have been treated far better by dogs than by most of the humans that I've ever met. Even dogs I don't know very well. There's a small puppy in the neighborhood, brand new, and boy, he's excited to see me. I mean, he's a small puppy, he's a boxer, but he's a young puppy, and he's excited to see me, and he treats me better than the humans who own him, because being treated like you're important has to do with how you treat each other, and not by the status that you hold. Usually the people who suck up to kings and treat them well, the people who give them plums, as in that poem, stuck in his thumb and pulled out a plum, that's another word for a bribe, are people who are trying to curry favor and buy their access to the throne. In fact, Sir Thomas More told Richard Rich, who would later become First Baron Rich and testify against Thomas More at his execution hearing, that he should not attempt to seek a position in court. Thomas More didn't really like his. That Richard should go and try and be a teacher and try and make a difference. Because when was the last time a king or queen actually made a personal difference in your life? When was the last time somebody important actually condescended from their throne and treated you like you matter? Because let's face it, unless you have money or power or prestige, most of the upper muckety-mucks at the top echelons of society don't really give a flying pinwheel about you or what you bring to the table. All they want is your vote, your taxes, and your stuff. They don't really care about you. It's not a personal thing. They don't view you as a person. They have too many people in order to care about you individually. But teachers can, neighbors can, families can, friends can, employers can, and so it's much, much, much more important, rather than seeking to be treated like a king or a celebrity or a politician, to seek out the people and keep them in your life who treat you like you matter. In 2016 to 2017, I had the unexpected fortune/misfortune of having just about all of the relationships that I had in my life actually resolve themselves. And it bothers me a little bit because almost all of them resolved themselves. But what I really realize is that most of them were dead weight, and that all the dead weight went away. The few who persist are the people who treat me like I matter. People who message me the month or so before my birthday and say, hey, your birthday's coming up, what can I get you? Even though they're only going to give me like a $5 or a $10 item, but because they remember my birthday and they want to make a gesture, and that shows that I'm important. These are the people worth keeping around. As for my neighbor, I really hope that the royal treatment that he was enjoying is that kind. It does exist, it's just not as common as we think. The other kind of being deposed, threatened, usurped, and imprisoned is much more common, even in dating relationships. But if he's found someone who actually treats him like he matters, then I celebrate that union and I wish him all the best. If you have that in your life, enjoy being treated like a king in the ways that it is right to be treated like a king. And make sure you're watching your back, because sometimes your enemies may plunge a life in it. If you don't believe me, go reread some Shakespeare. Then that's my Friday rant. Have a good Friday and a good weekend, and take care of yourselves and each other, especially those who make you feel like you're important.